I think the conversations that I had about race with my family was primarily led by my dad, and it would just be in little lessons. Like, I'd pick up the phone and I'd say hello, and he goes, "I can tell you're Korean over the phone." I was like, "It's because I am Korean and I'm on the phone with you." And he goes, "No, no one should be able to tell you're Korean on the phone. People should just think you're American."
When my parents talked about Americans, they clearly meant white Americans. When they meant any other kind of Americans, they named them. They said black people or Latinos or Native American Indians was the language they would use for Native people. And so I understood early on that a real American was a white American and everybody else had to be qualified.
Well, Asian American to me is a political identification, not like Democratic or Republican, but meaning, a way to organize, a group identification that has political implications and meaning and power and strength.
Wearing this skin color is a big deal to me, which is why I don't say I'm just American anymore, because I'm not. Because America doesn't see me as just American.
My first experience with race was when I was 6 years old. I fell in love with this girl named Janice, and I went up to her in the sandbox, and I was like, "Janice, I love you." And she was like, "You're the color of poop." And that was memory number one with racism. And I didn't know what that was. I just took that literally. I was like, "What? No, it's not rubbing off." Like, it was very terrifying.
These children around me already had the racial epithets to use against me. It's the first time in my life, of course, that I heard, chink and jap and gook.
When I was in second grade, I used to walk a little bit to the bus stop away from my school, and there was a boy who used to beat me up. And when he used to beat me up, he used to call me the N-word, which I didn't quite know what it meant, but I knew that it was something negative. People who evoke the most fear in me is 10-year-old white boys. I will cross the street.
My dad used to run a small business, and I remember people coming in who weren't Korean, and just white customers coming in, and they would just tell my dad to go back to his country. And this is before my dad had a full grasp on the English language. And I remember seeing my dad's hands being balled up in fists underneath the counter, but my dad just saying, "Okay, thank you, come back soon."
Well, my dad, he grew up during a very interesting time in India's sort of development and growth. So he grew up when partition happened. And during the time of partition, there was a lot of aggression. So for him to hear my stories of microaggression, he just didn't have a whole lot of room or empathy to understand what it meant. Because he's like, "I'm dealing with full-on aggression. I've seen full-on riots and people be killed. Fine, kids call you Saddam Hussein, just deal with it. We have an amazing opportunity here. We have freeways, Wi-Fi, and Jamba Juice. You better go be president, no excuses."
I had enough of stereotyping and targeting and not knowing who I was that I decided, okay, I wanted to become invisible. I didn't want any eyes on me. So I took a big step of basically taking off my turban, cutting off my hair, and that worked for a while.
But I find that the Asian American community as a whole, even the young community, they're very complacent about justice and race. And I think it's because, actually I know it's because a lot of them buy into the model minority myth. They don't really think in terms of immigration flows.
Immigration was opened in 1965 to professional Asian families, so we were really chosen and creamed from our countries.
And that ties into the model minority myth that characterizes the Asian American community as high achieving, apolitical, and just assimilated within the broader context of quote unquote American society. And that's a very pernicious myth.
I think it's a way to pit Asian Americans against African Americans in particular, to say, look, this racial group is doing so much better. They're able to do X, Y, and Z.
Was I ever a model minority? Of course. I was a good student, and that's probably the extent of it. But I had a cousin who had a murder rap.
I was the only Asian kid in Ridgewood, in a working class neighborhood. And then when I went to high school, I hung out with gangs. I got into a lot of trouble, and I barely made it into college.
This is home for me. The Bronx is home for me. And I think that growing up with Black, brown folks, again, determines like our political alignment and solidarity work around like Black Lives Matters and things like that, because we came from the same community, we lived in the same ghettos, and we know what it means to be invisible and abandoned by the U.S.
When you look at more deeply within our own communities and how we play our role and how we're treated even differently within colorism and the spectrum of our skin tone, Vietnamese people are treated differently and better than Cambodians, or Lao people or Hmong people, because we're lighter. And I think with our own communities, we have to acknowledge that privilege of our skin color, and how we play a role being complacent and not being complacent and fighting back against what the system is between white supremacy and anti-Blackness and everything in between the systems that upholds those two.
It's very, keep your head down, eyes in your own lane, and make sure things are better for us. And I think that I saw that a lot growing up, and I've definitely thought that at some point in my life, where I would see injustices happening to other groups of people in this country, and I would tell myself, no, but you have your own things to worry about. You need to make sure that things are better for you. But then I realized when I grew up that it's not any of us that have the problem. It's the system that's the problem. And, when the tide rises, all boats rise. So we need to stand by each other and we need to support one another.